Claire walked slowly through the palace corridors, her body still weak from the days of recovery. Marcus stayed close beside her, ready to catch her if she stumbled, but Claire barely noticed him. Her attention was fixed on the doorway ahead, on the courtyard beyond, on the creature that was waiting for her. When she stepped outside, the morning sun of Kethros washed over her in waves of warmth. The courtyard was filled with Volanti officials and guards, all of them watching as the small human woman approached the massive Vorith that had terrorized their physicians for months. Azeron saw her immediately. The creature rose to its feet, and for a moment, Claire remembered the first time she had seen it, weak and afraid and ready to attack anything that came close. Now Azeron moved with grace and strength, its scales shimmering with colors that Claire had learned meant happiness. She walked forward, and Azeron met her halfway. The creature lowered its enormous head until its nose touched Claire's chest. She wrapped her arms around as much of that head as she could reach, pressing her face against the warm scales, and she felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Azeron made that low sighing sound, the one that meant contentment, and its breath ruffled her hair. The Volanti watched in silence. Some of them had witnessed the bonding ceremonies between emperors and Voriths over the centuries, but none had ever seen anything like this. The bond between Claire and Azeron was different. It was not a bond of power or divine right. It was simply love, pure and unconditional, flowing between two beings who had chosen to trust each other. Empress Sithara emerged from the palace. She moved through the crowd, her subjects parting before her like water, until she stood just a few feet from Claire and Azeron. Her eyes were full of wonder as she watched the human and the Vorith together. She spoke quietly, as if afraid to disturb the moment. She said that in 10,000 years of Volanti history, no outsider had ever bonded with a Vorith. The creatures were sacred, believed to possess wisdom beyond mortal understanding. They chose their companions, and they had only ever chosen from the royal bloodline, until now that the Empress said that her advisors were divided on what this meant. Some saw it as a threat to royal authority. Others saw it as a miracle, a sign that the universe was larger and more wonderful than they had believed. But Empress Sithara had made her own decision about what it meant. She stepped forward and placed her hand over her heart in a gesture that Claire had learned was a sign of deepest respect among the Volanti. She said that Claire had saved not just Azeron, but the very soul of the Empire. She said that the humans' compassion and patience had shown the Volanti something they had forgotten, that the greatest power in the universe was not technology or conquest, but the simple choice to understand another being. The Empress made a formal offer. She invited Claire to remain on Kethros as the official caretaker of Azeron. It was a position of highest honor, one that had never existed before because no one except the ruler had ever been allowed close to the Vorith. Claire would be given a home in the palace, access to all the resources of the Empire, and the personal protection of the crown. Claire felt Azeron's nose pressed gently against her back, and she knew that the creature wanted her to stay. She thought about her little clinic on Haven's Rest, about the simple life she had built there. She thought about Earth, about her family and friends, about everything she would be leaving behind. But she also thought about what she could build here. She accepted the Empress's offer, but she made a request of her own. She asked for permission to establish a training program for Volanti physicians and animal caretakers. She wanted to teach them what she had learned over years of working with frightened creatures, that patience was more powerful than force, that understanding was more effective than technology, that every living being deserved to be approached with respect and compassion. The Empress agreed without hesitation. She said that her people had much to learn from humans, and that this program would be the beginning of a new relationship between their species. The news spread quickly across the Empire and beyond. The story of the human veterinarian who had saved the sacred Varth became one of the most discussed topics in the galaxy. Other species, who had dismissed humans as primitive and irrational, began to look at them with new eyes. Claire spent the following weeks building her program. Marcus stayed to help, postponing his return to Earth to serve as a bridge between human and Volanthi approaches to medicine. Healer Morath became one of her first students, eager to learn the techniques that had allowed Claire to do what he could not. The classes were simple at first. Claire taught basic principles of animal psychology, explaining how fear affected behavior and how patients could overcome it. She shared stories from her career on Earth, stories of dogs and cats and horses and the countless small miracles that happened when someone took the time to truly understand a frightened creature. The Volanthi students listened with the intensity of scientists encountering a new field of study. For all their advanced technology, for all their thousands of years of civilization, they had never developed this kind of relationship with other beings. They saw animals as subjects to be managed, not as individuals to be understood. Claire was showing them a different way. Azeron became her constant companion. The creature followed her through the palace gardens, sat beside her during lessons, and slept outside her quarters every night. The bond between them continued to grow stronger, and the Volanthi began to realize that Azeron had changed too. The creature that had been violent and afraid was now gentle and trusting, playing with the garden birds and allowing children to approach and touch its scales. One evening, Marcus found Claire sitting in the gardens with Azeron's head resting in her lap. The sun was setting over the crystal towers of the palace, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He sat down beside her and said that she had accomplished something remarkable. Claire smiled and said that she had just done what she had always done. She had seen a creature in pain and tried to help. The only difference was that this time, the creature happened to be sacred to an interstellar empire. Marcus laughed and said that she was being too modest. What she had done would change how the galaxy saw humanity forever. Before this, humans were known for their adaptability and their stubbornness, for their ability to survive in harsh environments and fight against impossible odds. Now, they would also be known for their compassion, for their ability to connect with other beings, for the strange and wonderful gift of their hearts. Claire looked at Azeron, at the ancient creature that had chosen to trust her, and she thought about all the frightened animals across the galaxy who might one day know the same kindness. She thought about the Volanthi students who were learning to see animals differently, about the message that would spread from world to world, that humans understood something precious about life, humanity's greatest gift. She realized was not their technology or their warfare or their stubborn refusal to die. It was something much simpler than that. It was the ability to sit with something different, something frightening, something strange, and choose to understand rather than control. It was the ability to reach out with an open hand and say, "I see you. I'm not afraid of you. I want to help." Azeron made a soft rumbling sound, and Claire stroked the creature's scales gently. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, thousands of worlds spinning through the darkness, each one filled with beings who might one day learn what she had tried to teach. And in that moment, sitting in a garden on an alien world with the most sacred creature in the Empire resting peacefully beside her, Claire felt something she had not expected. She felt like she had finally come home. The Royal Medical Chamber was the largest room Claire had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into shadow, and the walls were lined with technology that glowed with soft blue light. In the center of the chamber was an operating platform designed for creatures of Azeron size, surrounded by surgical equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. An observation gallery ran along one wall, and it was filled with Volanthi nobles and officials who had come to witness the surgery. Claire could feel their eyes on her as she walked beside Azeron, one hand always touching the creature's side. The Varith moved slowly, weakened by months of illness, but it followed Claire without hesitation. Empress Sithara stood at the edge of the observation gallery, her hands clasped tightly together. She had not slept the night before. Claire could see the exhaustion in her face, but there was also a fierce determination that reminded Claire of herself. Gila Morith and his surgical team waited beside the operating platform. They wore robes of pure white, and their faces were calm and professional. But Claire could see the tension in their movements. They had all lost colleagues to this creature, and they were walking into danger with nothing but a human's promise to protect them. Claire helped Azeron onto the platform. The creature settled with a low groan. Its body stretched out to reveal the swollen section of its abdomen. Claire positioned herself at Azeron's head, kneeling so that her face was close to the creature's eyes. She began to talk. She told Azeron about the surgery, about how the doctors were going to remove the things that were causing pain. She told the creature that it would feel pressure and movement, but that she would be there the whole time. She told Azeron that everything was going to be all right. The creature's eyes stayed fixed on her face. It trusted her. After everything, after all the fear and pain, it trusted her. Gila Morith stepped forward with his surgical instruments. The first incision was made, and Azeron's body tensed. Claire felt the creature's muscles tighten beneath her hand, felt the moment when instinct screamed at Azeron to fight. She hummed the same soft tune she had used in the garden. She stroked the scales above Azeron's eyes, keeping the rhythm slow and steady. The creature's body relaxed slightly, still tense but no longer on the edge of violence. The surgery continued. The Volanthi surgeons were incredibly skilled, their instruments moving with precision that bordered on art. They located the first cluster of parasites and began the delicate work of removing them. An hour passed. Then two. The parasites were more numerous than anyone had expected, spread throughout the secondary digestive system in dense colonies. Each removal required careful work to avoid damaging surrounding tissue. Gila Morith's face was grim as he realized how extensive the infection had become. Azeron was growing restless. The creature had been still for too long, enduring too much. Claire could feel the agitation building, could see it in the way the scales rippled with darker colors. She talked faster, her voice rising slightly, trying to keep the creature's attention. Then something went wrong. One of the surgical instruments slipped. Just a fraction of an inch, but it touched a nerve cluster that sent a spike of pain through Azeron's body. The creature screamed, a sound that shook the walls of the chamber, and its tail whipped around in a reflexive strike. A surgeon was thrown backward, crashing into an equipment cart. Guards rushed forward, reaching for weapons, and the observation gallery erupted in shouts of alarm. Claire did not think. She did not hesitate. She climbed onto Azeron's back. Everyone in the chamber froze. Claire positioned herself behind the creature's head, pressing her body against the warm scales, wrapping her arms as far around the massive neck as they could reach. She could feel Azeron's heart pounding beneath her, could feel the creature's entire body vibrating with fear and pain. She spoke directly into Azeron's ear. She told the creature that she was here, that she was not leaving, that she would stay with it no matter what. She told Azeron about a horse she had helped once, a horse that had been so scared that it nearly killed itself running from shadows. She told the creature how that horse had learned to trust again, how it had found peace, how it had lived a long and happy life. Her voice cracked. Tears ran down her face. But she kept talking, kept stroking the scales beneath her hands, kept pouring every ounce of love and reassurance she had into this connection. Azeron went still. The creature's breathing slowed. The rippling of its scales faded to soft, calm colors. It turned its head slightly, just enough to see Claire with one great eye. And the look in that eye was something. Claire would never forget that understanding, gratitude, trust. Healer Morith was helped to his feet. He looked at Claire, at the human woman clinging to the back of the creature that had killed his colleagues, and he saw something that changed his understanding of the universe. He saw love that crossed the boundaries of species, communication that needed no words, a bond that defied everything the Volanti believed about primitive humans. He returned to his work. The surgery continued for 3 more hours. Claire stayed on Azeron's back the entire time, talking and humming and holding on. Her muscles ached. Her voice grew hoarse. But she did not move. The parasites were removed one by one. The damaged tissue was repaired. The infection was cleared. When Healer Morith finally stepped back and announced that the surgery was complete, the observation gallery burst into applause. Claire barely heard it. She was watching Azeron, watching the creature's breathing ease, watching the tension drain from its massive body. The Varth was going to live. Against all odds, against all expectations, this ancient and sacred creature was going to survive. She tried to climb down from Azeron's back, but her legs would not cooperate. The exhaustion of days without proper sleep, the physical strain of holding on for hours, the emotional weight of everything she had done finally caught up with her. The world tilted sideways. Claire felt herself falling, felt hands reaching out to catch her, felt consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Azeron's head turning toward her, one massive limb stretching out as if trying to catch her. And in the creature's eyes, there was something that looked very much like fear. Not fear for itself. Fear for her. Then everything went black. When Claire opened her eyes, she found herself in a Volanti healing pod. The technology surrounding her hummed softly, filling her body with warmth and energy. Marcus was sitting beside her, his face lined with worry that melted into relief when he saw her wake. He told her that she had been unconscious for 3 days. The surgery had been a complete success. Azeron was recovering well, eating again, showing signs of its old strength and vitality. The Empress had declared Claire a hero of the Empire, but there was something else. Marcus needed to tell her. He helped her sit up and led her to the window of the healing chamber. There, in the courtyard below, Claire saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. Azeron was there. The massive creature had positioned itself directly outside her window and had refused to move since the surgery ended. The Volanti had tried to lead it back to the gardens, had tried to coax it with food and attention. But Azeron would not budge. The creature was waiting for her. Claire pressed her hand against the window, and Azeron's great head rose. Their eyes met across the distance, and even through the glass. Claire could feel the connection between them, stronger now than it had ever been. She looked at Marcus and asked if she could go outside. Marcus smiled and said he thought she had better. 3 days had passed since Claire first sat down in the gardens of Kethros. She had barely slept, taking only short naps when Azeron seemed calm enough. Marcus brought her food and water regularly, always approaching slowly and leaving quickly, so as not to disturb the fragile peace that was building between the human and the creature. On the morning of the 3rd day, Claire made her move. She had spent hours studying Azeron's body language. She had learned the meaning of each shift in the creature's scales, each movement of its delicate ear fins, each change in the sound of its breathing. She knew when Azeron was in pain and when the pain had eased. She knew when the creature was watching her with curiosity and when it was simply resting. And she knew, with a certainty that came from years of working with frightened animals, that Azeron was ready. Claire stood up slowly. Azeron's head rose, its eyes tracking her movement, but there was no tension in its body. She took a step forward, then another. She moved the way she had moved around countless scared animals. With her body turned slightly to the side, her eyes not quite meeting the creature's gaze. Her hands open and visible. She spoke as she walked. She told Azeron about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, about the animals that lived there. She told the creature about dogs and cats and horses, about how humans had learned to live alongside other beings for thousands of years. Her voice was calm and steady, a constant stream of gentle sound that said, "I am not a threat. I am a friend." Azeron did not move away. It watched her approach with those ancient, knowing eyes. And Claire could see something in them that made her heart ache. Hope. This creature had given up hope, had resigned itself to dying alone and in pain. But now a tiny spark of that hope was returning. Claire stopped about 5 feet from Azeron. She could feel the heat radiating from the creature's massive body. She could see every detail of its iridescent scales, each one a tiny work of art. Up close, Azeron was even more beautiful than she had imagined. She held out her hand. The moment stretched into eternity. Claire could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Behind her, she knew Marcus was watching, probably holding his breath. Somewhere beyond the gardens, the Empress and her court were waiting for news. Azeron lowered its head slowly, like a mountain bending. Its breath washed over Claire, warm and surprisingly sweet. The creature's eyes, each one larger than her head, studied her with an intelligence that went beyond anything Claire had encountered in an animal before. Then Azeron touched its nose to her palm. Claire felt tears spring to her eyes. The creature's scales were warm and smooth, and beneath them she could feel the flutter of a heartbeat, quick and nervous, but steady. Azeron was choosing to trust her. After all the pain and fear, after all the failed attempts by the Volanti physicians, this ancient creature was choosing to let a human touch it. She kept her hand there, not moving, just letting Azeron feel her presence. After a moment, the creature made that low, sighing sound again and pressed more firmly against her hand. It wanted the contact. It wanted the comfort. A sound came from behind her. Claire turned her head and saw Empress Sithara standing at the edge of the garden. The Empress's face was wet with tears. In 60 years of bonding with Azeron, she had never seen the creature willingly touch anyone outside the royal family. What Claire had done in 3 days was something that the Volanti considered impossible. Claire turned back to Azeron and began her examination. She moved slowly and carefully, running her hands over the creature's scales, feeling for abnormalities, watching for signs of pain. Azeron allowed it all, making soft sounds whenever her touch passed over a tender spot. It took her 2 hours to complete the examination. By the end of it, she was almost certain of the problem. There was a section of Azeron's lower abdomen that was swollen and warm to the touch. When she pressed gently on it, the creature flinched and let out a whimper of pain. She called Marcus over and asked him to bring his portable scanner. The xenobiologist approached nervously, but Azeron remained calm as long as Claire kept her hand on its side. Marcus ran his scanner over the swollen area, and his eyes widened at the results. Claire had found what the Volanti physicians had missed. The problem was in Azeron's secondary digestive system. Most Volanti animals had only one, and their medical technology was designed to scan primary organs first. They had never thought to check the secondary system, assuming that any problem there would show up in other readings. But Azeron was unique. As a Vorath, its biology was different from ordinary creatures. Its secondary digestive system was larger and more important than expected, and it had become infected with parasites. The parasites were small but numerous, and they had been feeding on the creature for months, causing increasing pain and weakness. Claire explained her findings to Marcus, and he looked at her with amazement. The Volanti had the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy, but they had missed something that Claire had found through touch and careful observation. They had been so focused on their machines, that they forgot to simply look at the animal in front of them. Empress Ithara was summoned, and Claire presented her diagnosis. The Empress listened intently, her expression shifting from grief to hope as Claire described the treatment that could save Azeron's life. Surgery would be required. The parasites had to be removed before they caused permanent damage. The good news was that the Volanthi surgeons were more than capable of performing the procedure. The bad news was that Azeron would never allow them to operate without sedation, and the creature's weakened state made traditional sedatives dangerous. Claire proposed an alternative. She would stay with Azeron throughout the surgery. She would keep the creature calm using the bond of trust they had built. It would be risky, but it was the only option that gave Azeron a real chance of survival. The Empress was silent for a long moment. Around her, the Volanthi officials whispered among themselves. Some thought the plan was foolish. Others thought it was desperate. But Empress Ithara had watched Claire earn the trust of her beloved companion, and she believed in the human's ability to do what she promised. She granted permission for the surgery. The preparations took the rest of the day. A team of Volanthi surgeons was assembled, led by a physician named Hela Morath, who had lost 2 colleagues to Azeron's defensive attacks. Morath was skeptical of Claire's plan, but he was professional enough to give it a chance. That evening, Claire sat with Azeron in the gardens and explained what was going to happen. She knew the creature could not understand her words, but she hoped that her tone and her presence would communicate what mattered, that she was there to help, and that she would not abandon the creature no matter what came next. Azeron rested its massive head near her lap, and Claire stroked the smooth scales gently. The creature's breathing had become easier over the past few days, as if the simple act of being understood had taken some of the weight off its pain. Marcus joined her as the sun set. He told her that she had done something incredible, something that would change how the galaxy saw humanity. But he also warned her that the surgery would be the real test. If anything went wrong, if Azeron panicked and hurt someone, the consequences would be severe. Claire nodded. She understood the risks. But when she looked at Azeron, when she felt the creature's trust in her like a warm glow in her chest, she knew she could not back down. This was why she had become a veterinarian. This was why she had spent her life learning to understand frightened animals. Tomorrow would be the hardest day of her career. Tomorrow would determine whether Azeron lived or died, and whether humanity proved itself worthy of the trust the Empress had placed in them. But tonight, Claire would sit with her patient and offer whatever comfort she could. Tonight she would just be present. The twin moons rose over the gardens, and human and creature waited together for the dawn. The night air on Kethros was warm and smelled of flowers that Claire could not name. She found a spot about 30 feet from Azeron and sat down on the soft grass. The creature watched her with eyes that held the light of the twin moons above. Its body was tense, ready to strike if she came any closer. Claire did not move closer. She simply sat there and breathed. She could feel the eyes of the Volanthi watching from the edges of the garden. She knew that Marcus was somewhere behind her, probably worried out of his mind. But she pushed all of that out of her thoughts and focused only on the creature in front of her. Azeron was breathing in short, quick bursts. Its scales rippled with colors that Claire was beginning to understand meant distress. Every few minutes, it would shift its massive body and let out a low sound of pain. The creature was suffering, and it had been suffering for a long time. Claire thought about all the animals she had helped over the years. She thought about the first rule she had learned in veterinary school. Before you can heal a body, you must calm a mind. An animal in fear cannot be helped because it will fight everything you try to do. The first job is always to earn trust. She began to hum. It was a simple tune, something her mother used to sing when Claire was a child and could not sleep. The melody was soft and slow, and it floated through the night air like a gentle hand reaching out. Azeron's head moved slightly. Its ears, which were more like delicate fins along the sides of its skull, turned toward the sound. Claire kept humming, not looking directly at the creature, keeping her body language calm, and Untouchable an hour passed. Then another. The twin moons moved across the purple sky, and the garden grew darker. Claire's legs began to ache from sitting still, but she did not shift. She just hummed and breathed and waited. She thought about a cat she had treated 5 years ago. The cat had been found in an abandoned building, starving and wild with fear. It had scratched everyone who tried to touch it. Claire had spent 3 days just sitting near its cage, reading books aloud, letting the cat get used to her presence. On the 4th day, the cat had walked to the front of the cage and pushed its head against the bars. It wanted to be touched. It had simply needed time to understand that not everyone wanted to hurt it. Azeron was the same. Claire was sure of it. This creature had been poked and prodded and restrained and drugged. Every being that approached it came with tools and machines and the intention to do something to it. Azeron had learned that approach meant pain. Claire was different. She had no tools. She made no sudden movements. She asked nothing of the creature except to share the same space. Around midnight, Azeron lowered its head slightly. The tension in its body eased just a fraction. Claire noticed and felt a small spark of hope, but she did not change what she was doing. She continued to hum, continued to breathe, continued to wait. Marcus's voice came softly from behind her. He asked if she was all right. Claire gave a small nod, but did not speak. She did not want to break the fragile connection that was beginning to form. The Volanthi officials were growing impatient. Claire could hear Counselor Veth speaking in hushed tones to someone, probably complaining about the lack of progress. They expected her to do something, to take action, to fix the problem. They did not understand that sometimes the most powerful action was no action at all. She thought about what Counselor Veth had told her on the journey here. Humans were strange to the other species of the galaxy. Most intelligent beings approached the universe with logic and calculation. They saw animals as resources or threats or subjects for study. Humans were different. Humans formed emotional bonds with creatures that could kill them. Humans mourned when their pets died. Humans talked to animals as if the animals could understand. The Volanthi found this behavior primitive and irrational. But they had also noticed that humans could connect with dangerous animals in ways that no other species could. It was not a matter of technology or training. It was something deeper, something in the human heart that reached out to other living things and said, I see you. I'm not afraid of you. I want to understand you. That was what Claire was offering to Azeron now. Not medicine, not solutions. Just presence. Just patience. Just the message that she was here, and she was not going to hurt it. The hours continued to pass. Claire's back ached and her eyes grew heavy, but she did not move. She watched Azeron, and Azeron watched her. And slowly the distance between them seemed to shrink, even though neither of them had moved an inch. As the sky began to lighten with the approach of dawn, something changed. Azeron made a sound that Claire had not heard before. It was low and soft, almost like a sigh, and it carried with it a note of something that felt like curiosity. The creature lifted its head higher and looked at Claire with eyes that were still full of pain but no longer full of fear. It studied her as if seeing her for the first time, as if all the hours of patience had finally allowed it to see her as something other than a threat. Then Azeron moved. It was just a slight shift, a repositioning of its massive body, but the movement brought it a few feet closer to where Claire sat. Claire felt her heart beating faster, but she kept her body still. She kept her expression calm. She continued to hum the same soft tune. Counselor Veth appeared at the edge of the garden. The dawn had come, and he announced that Claire's time was up. He demanded to know what progress she had made. Claire ignored him. She was watching Azeron, and Azeron was watching her, and something was happening between them that words could not describe. Empress Sithara arrived, her robes flowing behind her like water. She looked at the scene before her and raised a hand to silence. Counselor Veth. The Empress understood something that her counselor did not. She could see the subtle change in Azeron's posture. She could feel the shift in the air. Claire finally spoke. Her voice was quiet and steady. She told the Empress that Azeron was not aggressive. The creature was terrified and in pain. Every Volanthi approach had been clinical and forceful, and this had taught Azeron to see help as harm. She needed more time, she said. She needed to show this creature that she was different. The Empress asked how much time. Claire said she did not know. It could be hours. It could be days. There was no schedule for earning trust. It happened when it happened, and pushing it would only destroy the progress she had made. Counselor Veth protested. He said that the Empire could not wait while a human sat in the garden and hummed songs. There were political matters to consider. There were religious implications. The high priests were already questioning the wisdom of bringing in an outsider. Empress Sithara silenced him with a look. She said that she had watched Azeron suffer for months. She had watched her beloved companion retreat into fear and pain. This human had done more in one night than all the physicians of the Empire had done in all that time. She would give Claire whatever time she needed. The Empress looked at Claire with something close to gratitude in her eyes. She asked if Claire needed anything. Claire asked for water and some food. She also asked for everyone to stay back, to give her space to work. The creature needed quiet and calm. Every observer was a potential threat in Azeron's frightened mind. The Empress agreed. She ordered the gardens cleared of all officials and guards. Only Marcus would remain, at a distance, to monitor Claire's well-being. As the Volanthi departed, Claire turned her attention back to Azeron. The creature was still watching her, and as she looked into those ancient, intelligent eyes, she felt something she had not expected. Connection. It was small and fragile, like a thread of spider silk stretching across a vast distance. But it was there. Azeron was beginning to see her. Azeron was beginning to trust. Claire settled back into her position and resumed her humming. The sun rose over the gardens of Kethros, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. And in the clearing, a dying creature and a patient human continued their slow dance toward understanding. The small clinic on the human colony of Havens. Rest was quiet that morning. Dr. Claire Dunn was cleaning her examination table when the door opened and 3 figures walked in. 2 of them were not human. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. Their robes were made of fabric that shifted colors like oil on water. The 3rd figure was a human man in a diplomatic uniform, who looked very nervous. Claire put down her cleaning cloth and waited. She had treated animals from 6 different alien species since coming to this colony, but she had never seen creatures like these 2 before. They moved with a grace that made her think of dancers or perhaps predators who never needed to hurry. The human diplomat stepped forward. His name tag said Benjamin Cole, and his hands were shaking slightly. He cleared his throat and said that these visitors were from the Volanthi Empire. Claire had heard of the Volanthi. Everyone had. They controlled more than 2,000 star systems and had been traveling between worlds when humans were still figuring out how to make fire. One of the Volanthi spoke. His voice was like music played on instruments Claire had never heard. He introduced himself as Counselor Veth and said that he had come with a request from Empress Sithara herself. Claire felt her stomach tighten. An empress did not send counselors to small colony veterinarians without a very serious reason. Counselor Veth explained the situation. The Empress had a companion, a creature called a Varth. This creature was sacred to the Volanthi people. For 10,000 years, every ruler had bonded with a Varth, and the creature was seen as a living symbol of royal power and divine blessing. The current Varth was named Azeron, and it had been with the Empress for over 60 years. Azeron was dying. Claire listened as Counselor Veth described the symptoms. The creature had stopped eating. It had become aggressive and would not allow anyone to examine it. 17 Volanthi physicians had tried to help, and all 17 had been killed by the creature's defensive attacks. The Volanthi had tried sedatives, restraints, and every medical technology they possessed. Nothing worked. Azeron seemed determined to die alone and in pain. Claire asked why they had come to her. She was just a veterinarian on a small human colony. She had no experience with creatures from the Volanthi homeworld. Counselor Veth's dark eyes studied her for a long moment. He said that humans had a reputation among the galactic species. They were known for forming bonds with dangerous animals. They kept predators in their homes and called them pets. They approached creatures that could kill them and somehow earned their trust. The Volanthi had studied this behavior and found it both disturbing and fascinating. The Empress had decided that if anyone could reach Azeron, it might be a human. And not just any human. They had researched veterinarians across all human colonies and found Claire's record. She had a specialty in working with traumatized animals. She had saved creatures that other doctors had given up on. She had a gift, they said, for understanding fear. Claire felt the weight of this request pressing down on her. She asked what would happen if she failed. Counselor Veth was honest. He said that if Azeron died under her care, it would damage relations between humans and the Volanthi Empire. Some would see it as proof that humans were not worthy of trust. The Empress was taking a great risk by bringing in an outsider, and that risk would fall on all of humanity if things went wrong. Benjamin Cole spoke up. He said that the diplomatic corps had approved this mission and that Claire would have full support from Earth's government. He also said that she could refuse. No one would force her to go. Claire thought about the frightened animals she had treated over the years. She remembered a dog named Rusty who had been so badly abused that he tried to bite anyone who came near him. It had taken her 3 weeks of patient work, but eventually, Rusty had learned to trust again. She remembered a horse that had been trapped in a burning barn and would not let any human touch it afterward. She had spent hours just sitting near that horse, reading books aloud, until one day it walked over and put its head on her shoulder. She asked Counselor Veth to describe a ZUR on. The counselor's expression changed slightly. He said that Azeron was beautiful and terrible. The creature was as large as a small building, covered in scales that shimmered with every color of the rainbow. It had 6 limbs and a tail that could crush stone. Its eyes were ancient and knowing, and when it looked at you, you felt like it could see everything you had ever done or thought or dreamed. Claire made her decision. She would go. The journey to the Volanthi Empire took 4 days. Claire was given a cabin on a Volanthi transport ship, and she spent most of the time reading everything she could find about Varth creatures. The information was limited. The Volanthi considered Vorath sacred and did not share detailed biological data with outsiders. What Claire could gather was that Voraths were extremely long-lived, highly intelligent, and formed powerful emotional bonds with their chosen companions. Dr. Marcus Hill joined her on the 2nd day of travel. He was a xenobiologist from Earth who had been studying alien life forms for 20 years. The diplomatic corps had assigned him to assist Claire and to record the mission for scientific purposes. Marcus was tall and thin with gray hair and kind eyes. He admitted that he was terrified of what they were walking into, but he believed in Claire's abilities. The Volanthi homeworld was called Kethros, and it was the most beautiful place Claire had ever seen. The sky was purple and gold, and the buildings rose like crystal towers toward the clouds. The royal palace sat on a hill overlooking a sea of silver water, and everywhere Claire looked, she saw gardens filled with flowers that glowed softly in the twilight. Counselor Veth led them through the palace to the sacred gardens where Azeron lived. Claire could hear the creature before she saw it. There was a low sound, something between a growl and a moan, that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Then she saw Azeron. The creature was magnificent and heartbreaking. It lay in a clearing surrounded by trees that bent toward it as if bowing. Its scales caught the fading light and scattered it into rainbows. But Claire could see the pain in the way it held its body. She could see the fear in its massive eyes as they tracked every movement around it. Empress Sithara stood at the edge of the clearing. She was tall even for a Volante, and her presence commanded attention without effort. Her face showed grief that had been carried for too long, and when she looked at Claire, there was desperate hope in her eyes. The Empress said that Azeron had not allowed her to approach in over a month. The creature she had loved for 60 years now saw her as a threat. Her physicians said there was nothing more they could do. Her advisors told her to accept the loss. But she could not accept it. She would try anything, even trusting a human. Claire watched as a Volante healer in white robes approached Azeron with a medical scanner. The creature's head snapped up, and before anyone could react, its tail swept through the air and struck the healer. The Volante flew backward and crashed into a tree. Guards rushed to help, and Azeron let out a sound that was pure anguish. Claire understood. This creature was not aggressive. It was terrified. Every attempt to help it felt like an attack, and it was defending itself the only way it knew how. She turned to the Empress and said that she needed to observe Azeron alone. No guards, no physicians, no scanners or equipment. Just her and the creature. The Empress hesitated. Counselor Veth protested that it was too dangerous. But Claire held the Empress's gaze and said that this was the only way. Empress Sithara looked at Azeron, then at Claire. She said that Claire had until dawn. If there was no progress by then, she would have to try something else. Claire nodded. She handed her communication device to Marcus, told him to watch from a safe distance, and walked toward the clearing where a dying god waited in fear and pain.